I wonder how many dudes didn't get their dick sucked that night after taking their date to Fletch Lives and laughing at any of these lines. Women are just well, fuck you.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for that perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Ashley Schlafly.
Hi, y'all.
And Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we've covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatthemovies.com and have a look. And at the end of each podcast, we will provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, please subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Watchmen. And our newest release is Lovecraft Country from HBO. You can find all of that information on current and past episodes at shatontv.com. Finally, you can hang out with us all week long live by following and subscribing to our Twitch channel, shatthemovies.com/Twitch. There, we play video games, host watch parties, and end each week with a big Shappy Hour cocktail party on Friday. Now, all that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
So we've been lucky to have many of our supporters who have, over the years, helped to keep the podcast afloat with some donations, with sharing us. And a lot of those people, we really appreciate it. They'll commission a movie for a special event. Then there is a different level. There's a benefactor, like John Hammond in Jurassic Park or John DuPont in Team Foxcatcher.
Wow.
So our commissioners tonight fall into that benefactor role. This was commissioned by Adam R. So now Adam and his brother Josh have commissioned a total of 7 movies. The Crow, The Princess Bride, Bad Boys, The Karate Kid, Forrest Gump, tonight's movie, and then also they have one for New Year's Day, which is The Silence of the Lambs. So these guys, thank you very much. We couldn't do it without you, and just it means a lot to us that you've stuck with us this long. And we are going to review tonight for Adam, the Good Twin, the Master of Disguise comedy, the 1989, some would say classic, Fletch Lives.
Now, Ash, Adam and Josh have been responsible for some of the best commissioner letters we've ever had at Shat the Movies. And this commission is like no other. They've written in about Fletch Lives. Would you mind reading that letter?
Sure. So Adam writes, Dear Shat Crew, it's a new year, so time for a new commission. For this round, I decided to go with what I feel like was one of the most underrated comedic classics of the decade, Chevy Chase's 1989 Fletch Lives. Chevy Chase's career in the 1980s had a slew of hits and cult classics, but for me, Fletch stands atop all of them. This movie had everything: hilarious comedic performances, outstanding dialogue, great physical comedy, numerous impersonations by Chase, and complete irreverence for anything resembling social decency. Even the synth is memorable. Throw in numerous cameos, shout out to the great Tex Cobb, and even some social commentary on the religious televangelist craze of the 80s. Really, would the righteous gemstones exist without Fletch Lives? And what you have is a 1980s comedic gem that grows on you like Southern kudzu, and one that absolutely affected my young, budding personality. Now, before you destroy it, I think this should be graded on a social justice curve. This movie definitely couldn't be made today. Regardless, I love it, so do your worst. Thanks again for all you do. Keep up the great work. Always the best, Adam R. P.S. For this year's Halloween season, I swear to Christ, if you don't cover Monster Squad, I'll commission the whole month of October and dedicate it to rerunning Samurai Cop. Just kidding. Maybe.
Well, thanks, Adam, and thanks, Josh. Fletch Lives is a 1989 American comedy starring Chevy Chase and a sequel to Fletch. It's directed by Michael Ritchie with a screenplay by Leon Capitanos based on the character created by Gregory McDonald. Fletch Lives was released by Universal Pictures and holds a 37% rating on Rotten Tomatoes based on 30 reviews, with the consensus Chevy Chase remains ideally suited for the role, but Fletch Lives lacks its predecessor's wit, relying instead on silly disguises, cheap stereotypes, and largely unfunny gags. Fletch Lives debuted at number 1 and went on to gross nearly $40 million worldwide. Wow. Ash, Big D, we always ask where you were the first time you saw Fletch Lives or any memories you have. Starting with you, Big D, what do you remember of Fletch Lives?
So it's good to go back and watch these movies again that we haven't seen in some 30, 40 years. But the Chevy Chase catalog has been painful. I will admit it. Growing up, I thought Chevy was the funniest guy there was. His movies were great. He had a string in the early 80s that he could do no wrong. You had Caddyshack, Fletch, Spies Like Us, which even though we gave it a bad review at the time, I liked it. The Vacation trilogy, The Three Amigos. But something happened in 89. It was a turning point. After Fletch Lives, he went from making funny movies to just absolutely not caring. His career was basically over. And what you got was like Nothing But Trouble or The Invisible Man or Cops and Robertsons. His old routine that as a group, we thought, hey, he's funny. All of a sudden, we just woke up and said, what the hell have we been doing? So it was good to go back and finally wake up and leave the cult.
Yeah, I have to be honest. When I think about Chevy Chase, I only ever really remember him from my childhood in those vacation movies. So these kinds of films, for the most part, I've never seen. Like, I've never seen Three Amigos. I've actually never seen Caddyshack. I had not seen Spies Like Us until you guys covered it recently. So those movies just aren't ones that remind me of my childhood because I guess my parents just weren't big Chevy Chase fans. So this was actually my very first time seeing anything Fletch. I don't know if I'd even known that there was a series of movies about someone named Fletch. And so I immediately went and Googled it and got nervous on that exact moment when I saw the Gone with the Wind spook poster. And I went, oh, okay. So this one's going to be interesting. And it certainly was.
Ash, I did the same thing and Googled it. And when I saw that poster, my exact words out loud to myself were, oh, shit. Because I'm like, God, we got to cover this. Yes. And I got to watch everything I say based on this poster. Now, I don't know if my story as an immigrant is a story of assimilation, but I feel like the older I get, the more accepting I am of mainstream American comedies. But as a kid, like this would have been forbidden viewing in our household. In Farsi, we have a term, it's called bimazeh, which means without flavor. Everything about this Fletch series and this entire style of comedy with the disguises and the goofy gags always seemed bimazeh to me. I'm pretty sure my mom probably saw this on a poster somewhere and said, bimazeh. So I've never seen it. And as a note, I've also never seen the original Fletch, Big D. So if you want to key us into the quality of that movie, that would be very helpful. But I feel like movies of this strain were specifically made for people my age, being 40, but in the 80s. So people who were born in 1940. Because most of my 80s knowledge, in retrospect, is either mature masterpieces like Blade Runner or kids movies, which is a lot of the stuff that we've covered. This is very different. This was a movie made, I think, for adults in the 80s.
I'm glad they made it for somebody. It wasn't for me.
Well, without further ado, Big D, please roll that trailer.
He was America's greatest investigative reporter. And now, he's back.
Any mail for me?
Fletch Lives. He's a master of disguise.
Elmer Fudd Gantry. This house is obviously infested with reticuloramys mariaquomos.
Well, what's that?
What's what?
And a dedicated professional.
I quit.
Rumor has it that you have inherited a sizable piece of property.
Mr. Fletcher?
As far as you know, what can I do for you?
There's been a murder.
Was she feeling all right last night?
Felt great to me.
And Fletch is the prime suspect.
You feel like making a statement?
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Demons out!
He's willing to try anything.
That's great.
Risk everything.
Bend over.
Ben, nice to meet you. Victor Hugo.
And stop at nothing.
Hold on tight!
Chevy Chase. Fletch Lives.
Fletch, a reporter in Los Angeles for the Los Angeles Times, is contacted by the executor of his late aunt's will, attorney Amanda Ray Ross. Ross informs Fletch that he inherited his aunt's 80-acre plantation, Belle Isle, in Thibodaux, Louisiana. Upon arriving, Fletch is disappointed to find the mansion terribly dilapidated, but he agrees to keep on its caretaker, Calculus Entropy. Fletch has dinner with Ross at her home, and she tells him of an anonymous $225,000 bid for Belle Isle. So, guys, this movie, like many movies of the late 80s and early 90s, starts in Los Angeles. And like a lot of 80s movies, the props department has run amok. And I like sets with character, despite myself being a minimalist. I don't like a lot of clutter in my own home. But this was too much. You just know that someone in the Fletch Lives props department was like, listen, guys, we can express a lot about these characters through the things in their offices or homes. All I know about Fletch now is that he really likes the Lakers, has way too much shit in his home. And I don't want to just pick on Fletch, which we will do during this podcast, but everyone's office and house is overflowing with shit in this movie.
Yeah, so I haven't seen Fletch in a long time, but what I remember works about it is that Fletch is in his element. He's an LA guy. And I think there's some murders or there's something going on down at the beach. So all of his costumes and disguises play around what he knows. The California beach bum. He has fantasies like he does in this movie, but he's playing for the Lakers and Kareem. But Gene, I have to ask you, because Fletch is supposed to be the greatest investigative reporter in LA. So we know that you were a big crack reporter at the Lima, Ohio Tribune or whatever it was, the Bugle. So did you ever crack the big case, in Lima? You put on your French maid outfit. You went undercover to get the scoop about something fishy. Is this how reporters do it?
I wish we had a newspaper name that cool. We were the Lima News.
Oh.
That's it. I know. Lima Bugle. It's got pizzazz. It's got sparkle. But now to answer your question, Big D, I thought this movie, until reviewing it, was about a secret agent. I was like, another spy movie with Chevy Chase. I didn't realize he was supposed to be a journalist, where the disguises make no sense. The thing about journalism school is at its most basic level, we're taught two really fundamental rules. One is be as objective as you possibly can. Everybody's subjective to some degree, but you try to be objective. And the other one is allow all the parties involved to provide their explanation, their side of the story. That's why you talk to the cops and you talk to the crooks. You talk to the suspect and you talk to the prosecutor. In that case, disguises make no sense. So you went to this fish house and you observed some things while you were cross-dressing. So what? That's your side of the story. What did you get here exactly? I don't get it. I think it's just an excuse for Chevy Chase to be a goof.
Yeah, and I guess I was expecting that. I guess I'd always heard that Chevy Chase is kind of this goofy guy that was lovable and was this leading man in the 80s. And like I had said at the beginning, the only really movies I'd seen him in were the vacation movies. And I was surprised at how similar he plays this character and the scenes where he's pissed off in Christmas Vacation, for example, because in most of this movie, maybe it was just me, but I felt like his jokes were falling really flat and I felt like he wasn't committed to them. And in some parts, it almost seemed that he was pissed while he was saying these one-liners and that he was angry to even be filming this movie, which made it really unlikable and not at all funny.
Yeah, there's a lot of comedic actors who we root for in the movies that they star in. I mean, Adam Sandler, you look at him, even Norm Macdonald. I'm like, yeah, let's go for him. Will Ferrell. Chevy Chase, his entire shtick is like 20% disguises and 80% just insulting everyone around him for no reason. It makes the hero of the story unlikable. And what's amazing is like Chevy Chase seems like he would actually be really good at being the villain in movies, but somehow in our warped 80s reality, he found a way to play this anti-hero.
Yeah, and Ashley, it's funny that you read that he was pissed and angry, because he actually was pissed and angry on set every day. The original script, which again is based on the Fletch novelization, is a series of books. And in the sequel, the original script, Fletch, he somehow gets onto a presidential campaign and becomes a candidate's press secretary. So you can imagine the hijinks that ensue. That would make sense. But you put him in this movie and he's like, fuck, now all of a sudden I'm out doing plantation jokes. I'm calling people boy. I'm talking about the Emancipation Proclamation. I'm wearing a swastika and riding a bike. But to say that he only has 2 tricks that, his comedy's based on, he has 3. You forgot I'll call it the oopsie daisy. In every movie, Chevy Chase will take something and go, oops, I dropped it. Oh, okay, orange juice in the briefcase. Ha ha, I'm so clumsy. He does that shit in every movie, and in every movie, it's not funny.
It sounded oddly sexual, Big D, but we've complained before about Chevy Chase when we covered Spies Like Us, when we did National Lampoon's Vacation. In every case, he is inexplicably portrayed as this irresistible sex machine. But I did appreciate one thing about Fletch Lives, which is it gave us a different dimension to Chevy Chase's sexuality, or at least Fletch's sexuality. I like Fletch's comfort in being seen as sort of gay or effeminate. When he was on the plane with that lady and he's talking about how he was like, I dated a Laker once. He's not afraid of playing that effeminate role or making people uncomfortable with his sexuality, which again, in a movie where he's playing this role with a lot of machismo, being really sleazy with people, it's nice to know that there is a part of this guy that's at least open-minded enough and comfortable enough in himself to not care what people think of his sexuality.
I don't think we can exactly call Chevy Chase, self-aware, because this movie shows us that either he's collecting a paycheck and it doesn't matter what the script is, or he is just kind of an asshole. Because in 170 movies plus that we've done for Shat the Movies, this was the first time that I was actually shocked. When this scene came on and Fletch falls asleep on the plane and we transition into this dream sequence sing-along, I could not fucking believe Chevy Chase is dressed as Colonel Fletch. He's sitting on the front porch of his plantation, the big house, and Betty puts her breasts in his face and she announces with glee, the field hands, which are all white slaves, thankfully, they want to dance for you, sir. And he says, oh, okay, I'm going to dance for them. And they break into zippity fucking doodah. It's a combination live action animated sequence with a bluebird and a hound dog. It is like the Song of the South. Who thought this was a good idea? Did this actually happen, or did I hallucinate this entire thing?
Unfortunately, you didn't, because as I was sitting in my sofa watching this, my jaw actually fell open because I was so surprised at this scene, so much so that when it was over, I rewound it, made my husband come in and watched it a second time just to be like, is this really fucking on screen? Is this happening right now? And I thought, wow, this movie must have been lampooned, because there's no way 1989 was this backwards, right? So I start furiously Googling Fletch Lives, Song of the South, and all of this stuff came up. And just a few that I found that were super interesting. Roger Ebert called this scene one of only 2 things good with the movie. And then other critics called it, quote, the film's most inspired moment. And other critics said that it was the best part of the movie, unironically. They genuinely thought it was the best. And I was shocked, but then I thought about it. You're there in Orlando, Big D. I mean, Disney's Splash Mountain is only just now getting a redo. It has been the Song of the South theme since it opened up when I was a kid. So I guess maybe it isn't that crazy, but I don't know. I thought this was absolutely bizarre. Absolutely bizarre.
Well, some background to it and maybe why it turned out to be so crazy. They went to Disney to license the song and they figured, holy shit, this is going to cost us, let's say $100,000. Disney licensors, they must have been asleep. They came back and said $200. The producers almost fell out of the chair, and they took the extra money that they had saved to hire choreographers, to hire that dance mob, to hire the animators actually from Disney that worked to do the Hound Dog. So maybe in the original script, this was only a little 20 or 30-second clip. It became this majestic piece of just, what the fuck, 80s cinema? Kind of by mistake. They had the money and they just didn't think about how they're going to use it.
But it still felt half committed because like the dance routine was horrible. Like it wasn't even like, I don't know if it was like they were intentionally trying to be bad or if they were, parodying something I didn't understand, but I thought it was ridiculous. And this whole setting there at the plantation, I immediately recognized. So this in real life, Belle Isle is the Homa house in Darrow, Louisiana. I've been there before. When I was in high school, we still went on plantation field trips, like as a part of our social studies classes. We would go visit these plantation homes, and the house is beautiful. And that's a big thing I think that a lot of people who aren't from the South don't understand is like this idea of plantation tourism that exists in the Deep South. So for example, like Homa's house or Oak Alley, which is most famously in Interview with the Vampire. That's the house that Louis lives in that movie. It's absolutely gorgeous. To the plantation tours in Natchez, Mississippi, to the Beauvoir house on the beach in Biloxi, Mississippi, which was Jefferson Davis's home. This is a huge piece of the tourism that exists down there. I mean, people flock from all over to go stay in these homes, both in the big house and in the slave quarters. And I have friends who wait their whole lives to get married in these homes and to do a Southern tradition that's called a bridal shoot. I had to fight with my mother for months about not doing my bridal shoot at the Beauvoir house in Biloxi because that's where other family members had done it. I mean, it's a big thing there. And so I couldn't help but think of all of that as I'm watching Fletch, try to make money off of it, like the plantation tourism that still exists today.
Yeah, baby, I love you so much. Do you want to spend your special day with me at the Eagle's Nest? We can stay overnight in Hitler's bed. I mean, that's what it feels like to me. I've always been horrified, Ash, by this very thing. And I thought maybe it was just because I was, born in New York and raised in the Southwest that I didn't understand why you would want to take the place of nightmares, a plantation, and make it a romantic getaway. Ryan Reynolds recently, I think it was like last week, apologized for marrying Blake Lively at a South Carolina plantation. And Ash, I've been in New Orleans nearly every spring of my adult life. And every place I've stayed that wasn't a friend's house always had those like brochures for the plantation tours. I've had college friends who were like, we stayed in real slave quarters. Isn't that cool? And yeah, I get it. These homes are huge and they are ornate and they have a beauty to them in that their architecture is so drastically different from anything we have today. But I can't help but think they're built by slave labor. Like I'd like to see these buildings razed or at the very least, like occupied by Black families, in a twist of irony.
No, I'm okay. I think you have to leave them there. I think because they are a reminder of the past. I wouldn't turn them into tourism. That's where I have a fucking problem. If you try to add on some attractions or some rides to Auschwitz, that's a mistake, right? But having the building there, you wouldn't just fucking flatten it. You need to have some place to go and remember. But there is also, as you guys are talking, I want to let you in on something that ties back to Fletch. In the first Fletch movie, everyone who he makes fun of is like the elite, the country club crowd. That's who he rails against. So everybody who is in this plantation video, most of them are people from his past, or a lot of them are. Like you see Frank, his editor, sitting there, and he says, hey, Uncle Frank, what song do I like? Also, Gillette, the attorney, is there, the one who he goes, come here, boy. That one, which I was like, whoa, okay, even though there's a white guy. Even the Underhills, which were a wealthy tennis couple in the first one, they're playing tennis rackets like a guitar in that dance number. So I know they were trying something bigger with this, but out of context, it's just a shitty mess. And I'm not going to be all social justice warrior, okay? I'm not crying about the fact that I think it's inappropriate because it was 1989. Was it wrong back then? Yes, but I'd like to think that we've evolved. I've evolved. Back then, I might have thought, hey, okay, they're making fun of a plantation without really thinking about it in depth. But now as an adult, I found myself not thinking how politically incorrect this was. I found myself feeling really bad for poor Cleavon Little. He plays calculus. He is a classically trained Juilliard graduate who's a Tony Award-winning actor. And he is reduced to sitting there and listening to Chevy Chase tell him to jump down, turn around, and pick a bale of cotton. This is not social justice warrior. This is just feeling bad for a man who dedicated his life to being a serious actor, and he's playing sidekick to this schlep from a dickhead like Chevy Chase.
Ash, you mentioned your jaw dropping during this movie. That jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. I'd slam the armrest on the couch. Like, this is not really happening. And guys, all these scenes really make me look at my mom and, frankly, all of our parents very, very differently. I'm waiting for Thanksgiving when we're all sitting around the table and it gets quiet and I could just say, so, Fletch Lives. You guys were cool with Fletch Lives. This is a woman who told me like my Type O Negative album cover was offensive because there was lesbianism or vampires. You fucking let Fletch Lives pass. Like, somebody should have been telling me when I was about 12 years old, like, listen, there was this movie made. It should have never been made. They did horrible things. And Gene, never watch it. I don't care what your podcast career ends up being. Well, Fletch awakens the next morning to find Amanda Ross dead. He's charged with her murder and taken into custody, nearly being raped by his cellmate, Ben Dover. Dover's lawyer, Hamilton Ham Johnson, manages to get Fletch released. When Fletch declines a second, even larger offer of $250,000 for Belle Isle, this time presented by realtor Becky Culpepper, he starts getting harassed. First, a hired group of Klansmen harasses him. Then, an arsonist burns down the mansion. And finally, Ben Dover tries to kill Fletch during a raccoon hunt with some locals. Fletch determines to uncover the identity of the anonymous buyer whom he suspects is attempting to intimidate him into selling.
Okay, so now I understand we're doing Fletch Lives, but I want the plot to make sense. Don't betray the characters. Fletch works in the first movie because he's smart. He's street smart. He's a reporter. He knows how everything works. He can play the system. In here, he's a fucking idiot. You're already a suspect in a murder. You're in a southern town where the police chief, Billy Bob, says, hey, okay, we can hold you for whatever. I've seen My Cousin Vinny. I know what happens in southern towns to city boys. So he's going to go break into a sealed crime scene in a pink convertible Cadillac. Like, no one is going to notice. Hey, look, there's the Cadillac. We know who's there. Then he breaks into the morgue. He's contaminating evidence. Is he trying to look guilty? Hamilton Ham Johnson would have been so much easier for him to just frame Fletch for the murder. Fuck, spoiler alert, sorry. Don't try to buy it. Let him walk himself into a jail cell. Fletch will be in jail in no time if you let him keep fucking around.
Yeah, Big D, I don't think justice is the overriding motif in Fletch Lives. A woman died early in this movie. Fletch finds his lover, Amanda, dead in her bed, and he's still cracking jokes for like a half hour after her death. And then they say that they got him out because there wasn't enough evidence to keep him in jail. This guy flies into town. He gets picked up by Amanda. The next day, his lawyer, Amanda, is dead. He had sex with her. So I'm assuming there's some DNA involved there. Her body does not look like a person who just died. It looks like it was either refrigerated or completely drained of blood. And guys, the horrible part is I got sucked into this because halfway through the movie, Ham is like, you're off the hook for Amanda's death. And I had totally forgotten there was a murder in this film. Like, they just glanced by it so easily.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, what I didn't get is when he wakes up and he looks at her, she's so ashen. I was like, and he makes that joke of, I can't believe we slept so long. It's like, how long are you fucking asleep? Like 2 or 3 days? Because she looks like she's already started to decompose. I mean, you talked about the prop department going nuts. I mean, the fucking makeup department went all Twin Peaks with Laura, being found wrapped in plastic and blue. That's how Amanda looked in this. It was terrible.
Well, I think the subtext is that Chevy Chase is such a good lover that he could just knock you out for days because he's not surprised. But he lays down next to her corpse. She looks like the crypt keeper. He lays down next to her. She's dead. Does he get up? Does he recoil in horror? No, he says, hey, it was good, but it wasn't that good, right? The police come and they're like, hey, did you know her? What was going on? Yeah, she was my attorney. She was working on my briefs. Then he turns to the camera and smiles. She just fucking died. Hamilton, when he's driving him home, he says, yes, she was a dear friend. Does Fletch take his loss into consideration? No, he says, did she feel all right last night? He says, yep, she felt all right to me. Fletch, this was Ham's close friend.
I wonder how many dudes didn't get their dick sucked that night after taking their date to Fletch Lives and laughing at any of these lines. Women are just well, fuck you.
Well, especially the prison scene. I mean, y'all, I got so nervous when I saw his cellmate turn around with that blue eye makeup. And it was I know Oz hadn't come out yet, but it was a total Beecher moment in Oz. And I'm great, there's going to be some sort of rape or sex scene here. And then the fact that the dude's name is Bend Over. I mean, I rolled my eyes. And I think that this begins a pattern and the movie just becomes more unfunny, I feel after this prison scene than it even was before.
One thing I'm a real stickler for in film is when jail sex and prison sex are conflated. There's two really important things to understand in Fletch Lives. One is prison sex is a prison thing. That's why it's called prison sex, because you're in there for a long time. You know you're facing years, possibly life, and you got to make some decisions about your sexual needs versus your sexual openness. Listen, I can say I'm a heterosexual guy pretty firmly, but if I was spending the rest of my life in prison, I might be a little, flexible on that. Jail, on the other hand, is usually a brief stay. There's loads of supervision and sex is rare, if not non-existent. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was Tex Cobb, because he plays Bend Over. He was in the credits and I got really excited because I loved him in Raising Arizona as the bounty hunter. And then I see him in this makeup and my little heart's oh my God, he's going to be the tough, effeminate guardian for Fletch in this prejudiced and backward South. Not so much.
No, he's great. But am I the only one who finds Bend Over that he has a striking resemblance to the King Bee?
Now, the King Bee has much sexier eyebrows and not as wide a nose, but the overall, if I had to pick a human being I know to be a stand-in for Tex Cobb, it's the King Bee. No question.
Well, Gene, you have your opinion. You're a stickler about the whole prison versus jail sex. And I am a huge stickler about the idea that not all of the South is the same, particularly Louisiana, because Louisiana is a much different state than Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, than those states with these real thick Southern accents. And I couldn't get over the fact that their accents are also deep South, especially when we meet Becky Ann Culpepper, who's this sweet Southern gal. Fletch immediately starts to sexually harass her. And I couldn't get over her accent because real Thibodaux, Louisiana, the Waterboy with Adam Sandler gets the accent of Thibodaux more correct than this movie does, because they don't have these real thick Southern accents. They're Cajun. They've got a real thick Cajun accent. So every joke you hear about Boudreaux, living down the road and, Mache and all that, I mean, that's Cajun country and that's how they should be talking. And it was driving me nuts.
Yeah, they got the accents absolutely wrong, Ash, but at least they got Zapp's chips right. I did a little bit of a dance when I saw Bend Over eating the Zapp's chips, but you're absolutely right. This movie is clearly made through the Hollywood lens. And Big D, as you said, that works when it's a movie set in Hollywood. They got a lot of inside jokes. They get their environment. But one of my biggest turnoffs about movies from the late 80s and early 90s is that tendency to be so LA centric. Fletch is this walking personification of LA. It's on his hat, it's on his watch, and that extends to insulting everything about the South, even people who are just trying to do their damn jobs and be decent people. And Chase tries out a lot of looks in this movie, and I think he kind of cursed himself here because most of these costumes actually look better than Chevy Chase normally does. At one point, he pulls out that Bug Buster outfit and he puts on this wig that kind of pushes his hair up and off of his face and off of his forehead. He almost looks handsome, guys. He looks like an actor.
Yeah, and I've never, like I said, seen the original Fletch, so I don't know what his costumes or disguises are like there. But here, all of his disguises felt very like Clark Kent to me. It felt like he had one thing over his face that was different, and it made no sense why people didn't recognize him after a while, because he still looked like Chevy Chase. He still looked like this character of Fletch, and I didn't get why these disguises continued to work. Sure, maybe at the beginning when nobody knew him, but 3 or 4 deep, like, it just looks like he's dressing up, for a Comic-Con or for Halloween, but it still looks like fucking Chevy Chase.
Yeah, I know he's not exactly fucking Carrot Top. He's not carrying around a chest full of fucking props. But I don't want to be the defender of Fletch Lives, but I will let you know, when they started filming, there was a huge LA writer's strike. So the writers who were on set to actually try to improve, and if Chevy Chase wanted to do some improv and then tie it back to the plot, you weren't getting the A team. So I think that's why there's a lot of these scenes are just really, really bad. But Fletcher's disguises, they're embarrassing and too simplistic. The Billy Bob teeth, the glasses, a tiny hairpiece, right? This isn't Mission Impossible. Why don't they try to at least give him a fat suit? Have him be in something that you'd be like, okay, maybe that could be somebody else, But in the end, I think they wanted us to be like, oh, look, it's Chevy Chase, and he's fooling people with his teeth. After the first time, you're just like, fuck. I kept wanting somebody to call him out and to be like, you're that city slicker, Fletch. You ain't fooling me with that van outside. Fuck you, Fletch. That's what I wanted.
Well, and where the fuck is he getting these costumes from? I mean, does Thibodeau have like a huge local costume market, or is that huge trunk that he and Calculus rescue out of the Belle Isle during the fire? Is that where all of his disguises are? And if so, why does he have things like a Confederate Army general uniform that he's just, maybe one day is going to use? I mean, it made absolutely no sense to me. And I thought it was such a strange plot point that he's this master of disguise.
But even if you don't have outfits that are that different, your characters could be outrageously different. It's like he's got a Mad Libs generator he's like, okay, what voice am I doing? What blazer am I wearing? And what, facial disguise will I have? Will it be facial hair or glasses? Anyway, Fletch learns that the local megachurch, Farnsworth Ministries, is interested in obtaining the Belle Isle property. He investigates televangelist Jimmy Lee Farnsworth and discovers Farnsworth's daughter is Becky Culpepper. The toxic chemicals in the soil of Belle Isle are traced back to Bly Bio, a chemical waste facility in Mississippi. Fletch obtains an invoice from the plant's manager, which proves that Ham Johnson ordered the waste dumped on the Belle Isle land.
So to most of our listeners who are, let's just say, under the age of 35, the plot of the televangelist and, the religious themed amusement park, you'd be like, well, what the fuck's this about? But right around this time in 86, there was a big, controversy, and it was a hot topic in the U.S. There was a televangelist and his wife, Jim Bakker, and then Tammy Faye Mesner. They founded this television evangelical network called the PTL. And they actually built a Christian-themed water park, theme park, and residential complex in Fort Mill, South Carolina. And they named it Heritage USA. So at its peak, Heritage USA used to make $126 million a year until the IRS caught on and took away. What are you laughing at? What did I do?
Carolina.
What?
Carolina. Where the fuck is South Carolina?
I said South Carolina?
Yeah.
Oops. Sorry.
The great state of South Carolina.
The beer was in my nose. I was trying to hold it in. I was Carolina.
I think maybe I was doing my Thibodeau voice. I said, come down to South Carolina. So,
Jesus.
Sorry about that. So the IRS had to revoke their tax exempt status because they caught the husband, Jim Bakker, paying hush money to the secretary of the church that he had allegedly raped. So there was this huge revelation. Somebody went to jail for felony charges. There were convictions. They were in prison. They got divorced. The park closed. In Orlando, we have down the road something called the Holy Land. Somehow this place still operates as a religious full charity. So they don't pay any taxes. how do they manage, even in this day, to run a church that is clearly for profit, let alone an amusement park? And I feel bad for the people who do donate their money. But if there was a God, I have to believe that God would be seriously pissed off at anyone who runs these places or the people who are dumb enough to give their hard-earned money to what's obviously a scam. God wouldn't want you to go to an amusement park. God wouldn't want you to go on the Noah water slide. It's terrible.
Yeah, I completely resonated with this part of the movie. Growing up, my parents watched Benny Hinn, the televangelist, regularly. They watched David Wilkerson. They actually received his newsletters up into his death, predicting the end times. And my family is not wealthy at all. We're very classically middle class. And they do that middle class thing all the time where they talk about, if we won the lottery, what will we do with it? And the first thing that always comes to mind is they would give huge donations to both of these guys. When my family goes to visit my brother in New York, they go to the David Wilkerson Church. I mean, it's a big part. So I understand this idea of people that are smart people being swindled, for lack of a better word. And like I said, I think Farnsworth is a great caricature of that. And the other thing that I think they did really well is this whole being slain in the spirit thing, because I remember being a kid and a teenager standing up at the front of altar call, because I always got sent down to altar call because I wore so much black. And so they wanted to exercise me constantly. And so I remember eventually just pretending to be slain in the spirit, because otherwise they just continue to shake you and spit at you and throw water at you for longer. And so I would fall out, and it was always really super awkward because you would just be laying there on the ground, clearly conscious next to all these other people. And you didn't know, are they really conscious or are they really slain? And then they always put modesty blankets over the women. Even if you're wearing pants, they'd come in, they'd lay these modesty blankets over you, so that your no-no square was not exposed while Jesus was working through you. And yeah, I totally relived my childhood through this part.
So now looking back on it, what percentage of the people on the floor were faking it?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, a lot of those people really bought into it. And I mean, psychology is real. I mean, a lot of them would throw up like their demon spirits. I mean, it was intense. So, I think a lot of them believed it. Do I think they were really slain in the spirit? No. But do I think that they believed that they were? A lot of them did, yeah.
Well, I'm really glad both of you brought this scene up, because it's one of the few things I really liked about this movie. Arleigh Ermey, who plays Jimmy Lee Farnsworth, he is so underrated as an actor. And I think I was guilty of that too until seeing this movie, because I just remembered him as the drill instructor from Full Metal Jacket. And I thought, well, yeah, as a Marine, he was just playing himself. But here he's not playing a Marine. Dude is playing a very nuanced role as this pastor, because you're supposed to think that he's a scam artist and that he's not really a believer and that he's a bad guy, but you actually discover that he's not entirely evil. He genuinely believes in the good of his ministry with, a few tricks up his sleeve. But as he's driving around with Fletch, he's saying, you think I got too many pictures up of myself? And, he really does believe in all of this and seems to be an okay guy. The other thing I really loved about these scenes, though, is the camera work at the TV ministry. One of the things that made me laugh during this movie, was these few minutes of glory. Nearly everything that happens during Farnsworth Ministries programs is great. We see a lot of action that's actually shown to us through the studio cameras, and also these grainy 80s CRT TVs, which adds a degree of comedy to them. The angles that they shoot at, the performances of these actors, they're undeniably funny. And there is this part for 90 seconds where Chevy Chase is playing Claude Schmoot and he's healing people. And he just lets go of his cynicism and his shitting on everybody. And he's actually fun to watch for 90 seconds.
Yeah, and I do have to compliment the show's on-screen talent. Their lineup, it is amazing. When the voice of the church comes on, he says, and today, Mimsy Carlisle, God's own songbird, the heavenly feet of Damon Father, God's favorite simian, Mr. Coco, the Ringfield Revivalist, the Brady Family Singers, and Ted Medley in the band. I wanted to see more of these guys. There was a genuine fun in this. It wasn't shitting and embarrassing somebody. It seemed like everybody was having fun together.
Yeah, it definitely was the most enjoyable part of the movie. But then unfortunately, we return to Fletch and his voiceovers when he leaves the church. And in that scene where he's in the car with Becky, I couldn't help but just think, like, why would anyone have sex with this man? I think he's gross. He dresses poorly. I think his haircut is ridiculous. He's not funny, but he has this cardinal sin that he thinks he is. And I had a little bit of hope when Becky, he goes in to kiss her and she says she needs to pee. And I was like, oh, great. She's not interested in him. And then you find out later, spoiler alert, that she just has some weird thing that she needs to pee when she plays hide and seek or when she's turned on. I don't know. I didn't really get it, but I would definitely be I need to pee so I could like get away from him, because I don't get why these beautiful women are even touching him, much less fucking him.
Oh, it's obvious why they're touching him and fucking him is because it's in Chevy Chase's rider. I guarantee every time he signs a contract to do a film, there has to be at least 2 or 3 beautiful women that would never in the context of the story be attracted to him. And then he has to make jokes about his sexual prowess. I felt bad less for Becky Culpepper than I did the actual actress, Julianne Phillips. That's who I felt bad for.
Now, I mentioned earlier in the podcast that Chevy Chase, does seem to be sort of fluid or at least confident in his sexuality. Then we get this character of Ed Harley. Now, for those of you who have seen Fletch Lives countless times, surely you recall the hilarious character Ed Harley. It's Chevy Chase in another blazer, this time with a mustache, and he walks into a biker bar and he gets called a pussy. Now, I lived in Ohio. I ride motorcycles. I ride mopeds to bars. I've been called a pussy. I've been this guy at biker bars. And it's ironic because motorcycle gangs and bikers at bars, they engage in a lot of behavior that I would consider somewhat homosexual. They usually don't have a lot of women around. They're checking out each other's hogs all the time. They wear matching outfits. You give each other nicknames. And dude, you sleep over at each other's biker crash pads and sometimes even engage in group sex. I'm not calling anybody gay. I'm just saying that if certain behaviors are supposed to make you a homosexual and be undesirable, bikers might want to take a look at themselves. Sturgis 2020.
So was I the only one who couldn't decide which way is this going to go? Is Fletch going to, ride off like a master motorcyclist, or is he going to pull a Pee Wee Herman and crash into the sign? I'm like, which way? I was leaning towards the Pee Wee Herman, but instead we get another Grease 2 Cool Rider sequence where somehow this LA investigative reporter, master of disguises, is now also Evel Knievel. He somehow manages to outride a group of skilled bikers. I was like, fuck you, Fletch. And then in doing research, that bar is the bar they filmed Pee Wee Herman's tequila scene, and then he hits the sign. So I was like, maybe on some deep, deep level, they're unaware. Somebody behind the scenes was putting some thought into this.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of it's just a waste as this movie continues to go on, and one of which in this section is the waste of Phil Hartman. I was super excited to see his name in the credits because I am a huge Phil Hartman fan, and then he's in this one part of the movie. He's got like 6 lines. He isn't even allowed to be funny. He's got a really terrible Mississippi accent, and I just kept going, wait, that's it? That's really all they're going to use Phil Hartman for? And that was a huge disappointment and a waste of a huge comedic talent.
Yeah, Ash, there are too few comedians out there who are both incredibly dark and incredibly funny. And Phil Hartman died far too young. And when I saw his name in the opening credits, I was so excited. I, like you, love pretty much everything the guy has done. And I realized in this scene, Fletch Lives is giving these guys nothing to work with. Like the funniest thing that happens during Fletch's visit to the toxic waste facility, where you've got Chevy Chase and Phil Hartman in the foreground, we're hoping for comedic gold here, is actually shit that's happening off screen. There's some sort of a scream with like a worker getting hurt, and they changed the days since an on-job accident sign. And I'm like, that was the big gag you got after having Phil Hartman in your movie.
Yep.
Well, Fletch confronts Ham with evidence at a costume party fundraiser, and Ham admits he polluted Belle Isle out of revenge. He says Farnsworth persuaded his mother in her confused mental state to give away her valuable land on which the church then built a profitable amusement park. Ham intended to devalue the land owned by Farnsworth Ministries, and he killed Amanda Ross when she realized his plan. Becky is captured by Ben Dover and brought to Ham's mansion, and Ham orders Dover to kill them both. Fletch creates a distraction, and Becky and he escape. They flee to Farnsworth Ministries church. Ham follows them, intending to kill Fletch, but he is shot by Calculus. Afterwards, Calculus reveals himself to be FBI Special Agent Goldstein, working undercover as part of an investigation of Farnsworth Ministries' financial dealings. All right, Ash, you mentioned this before. There's this costume party fundraiser, which I didn't know this was a thing in the South. Apparently, people dress up like Confederate officers, whatever. And of course, Fletch, although he's going to confront Ham, cannot resist wearing one more ingenious costume to infiltrate a dangerous situation. But I'm like, dude, if you're going to confront Ham, why don't you just show up in your normal clothes? Like, are you planning on having a party afterward? Like, you're like, all right, Ham, we got this settled. Now let's have some cocktails.
Well, why even confront Ham in the first place? I mean, Fletch is a terrible journalist, because if he were truly a good one, he would have broken the big story. He wouldn't have, he would have written it up rather than going to like get this gotcha, admit that you're wrong to me kind of situation with Ham. And I mean, I don't know, Gene, I only wrote, a features column for the Times-Picayune. I wasn't a real journalist like you, but I kept thinking like, this is not the way a real reporter would handle this, right?
There's a point where Fletch is having a conversation with Ham and he's like, haha, I have the upper hand on you, because if I don't get in contact with Becky in 10 minutes, she's going to go on TV and tell everybody about it. Now, this works if you're trying to negotiate something, like you're using the information as a bargaining chip. There's no bargain to be struck here. Like, what is the point of setting up this entire gambit of Becky going to Farnsworth? Why not just go to Farnsworth? He's hugely influential. You can have the entire community on your side, break the story in writing or on TV, make some extra money. Fletch is totally overplaying his hand for no reason.
That's because we needed Chevy to go back to his move number 3, the oopsie daisy, where he drops the framed picture, he steps on it, then he takes the urn and he stumbles around. He's going back to it's paint by numbers. That's what it is.
Now, Big D, we covered Clue, which I loved. You didn't really care for. And part of the reason you didn't care for Clue was because the endings were progressively ridiculous. Now, remember in Clue, you had 4 different endings. And in one of them, Tim Curry is an FBI agent. Well, Big D, I hope you agree that Fletch Lives makes Clue look like a sobering documentary, well-grounded in reality. We're supposed to believe here, for no reason at all, that a black FBI agent with a Jewish surname is living alone on a dilapidated plantation, and then he happens to be at the party at the right time, and then at the studio as well, right on time. And then, if you're an FBI agent, you should know better than to fire into a crowd. He shoots a guy with an entire crowd behind him. We had all this mystery building up, which I was genuinely engaged in. I want to know who done it, what was the motivation, and this is the payoff.
Well, he's deep undercover. He's like Donnie Brasco. He's been way undercover. And he says, Fletch, we've been working on this for years. What the fuck you been doing? Fletch walked around blindly in his backyard for 5 minutes, and he stepped in the toxic waste. What was Calculus doing? Watching the Yankee game on TV?
He was doing exactly that.
Yeah.
Well, returning to Los Angeles with Becky, Fletch is thrown a welcome home party by his coworkers and receives a $100,000 insurance claim check for the mansion fire. His ex-wife's alimony lawyer, Melvin Gillette, appears, offering to forego all future alimony payments in exchange for the Belle Isle property. Fletch happily signs over the polluted land.
So I was really confused by this ending, because he gets this huge office, he gets a company car, but I don't really understand why. Did he write a story about it? Or did he just come back from Louisiana and take the job? I mean, it didn't make sense that he benefits, professionally from what went on there. And also, how are they giving him all of this? I mean, was that what newspapers? I mean, it kind of reminds me of like Crocodile Dundee, where, she's going on this really expensive 5-star hotel trip to Australia for a month, and then she brings him back and puts him up at the plaza. I mean, did newspapers really have this kind of cash in the 80s?
Well, I mean, Ash, journalism pay has really declined since the 80s. So when I entered the workforce after college, so like 2002-ish, having a journalism degree and working as a copy editor, I was told, and it was true, it was basically a ticket to move anywhere you want. I moved to New York City. I moved to the Bay Area. I lived in Chicago as a copy editor. It was fine. And then it steadily declined to the point where like I ended my career in, as you mentioned, Big D, Lima, Ohio. But you're absolutely right, Ash. Even if it's in a time when there's plenty of money, like what is he being hired back to do? Why did he now get a private office? And the only thing I could chalk it up to is it's Chevy Chase. And he has to have the movie end that way. This guy is so fucking into himself. Like any actor, Jim Carrey, Jeff Daniels, who was doing it for the comedy, like we saw in the end of Dumb and Dumber, would have embraced this idea of Fletch just can't win. It would have been such a better ending. Maybe he gets the girl or maybe he gets his job back, but Fletch should really wind up pretty much right where he started. That's what makes a movie funny. Instead, this dickhead gets a bunch of money. He gets the preacher's daughter. He gets freedom from his alimony and he gets that private office. And as you said, Ash, who's celebrating his return and why? Fletch doesn't seem to have a single friend in the world that we've seen. And if that wasn't enough, then we get the end credits, which is more Chevy Chase.
Yeah, but I think it's not just Fletch that doesn't have any friends. It's Chevy Chase doesn't have any friends. He is hated in Hollywood. Everybody, even the old SNL cast, nobody talks to him anymore. He doesn't get any roles. He has become more the object of the joke than the ones that he's making. He had a roast back in 2002. None of the SNL cast even showed up. And Paul Schaefer, who used to he was the band leader for Dave Letterman, he said, you know, Chevy Chase used to make us laugh so much. And then you inexplicably stopped in about 1978. That is so true. And for me, Chevy stopped making me laugh at about 1989.
Yeah, and I guess the only other thing with Chevy Chase that I've seen is Community. I was a big fan of the first couple seasons of that show where he plays Pierce, and just seeing this and then comparing it to like the character that Pierce became, it makes that show even funnier because it's like they were trolling him the whole time, because I feel like Pierce is exactly who Chevy Chase like is today. I feel like he could go and be this grumpy old man that sexually harasses young girls at a community college because he has no friends and has nothing to do it. He's an independently wealthy and just has, you know, time on his hands, and maybe that's the most brilliant Chevy Chase performance that exists, because it is so much like I would imagine Fletch and all of his characters eventually grew up to be.
So Ash, go back and research how Dan Harmon and Chevy Chase ended their relationship.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Not very well.
Mm-mm.
But this movie, I got to tell you, as it gets to the end, I'm thinking, thankfully, it's over. It cannot get any worse. Then we get this credit sequence montage, and it consists of Chevy and all of his disguises, his teeth, his hair, his blazers, and then him making surprised faces like, oh, wow, look, oh, and then there's more breasts in his face. And it was like they were trying to convince us as we were leaving the theater in 89. And we're like, holy shit, that movie sucked. We'd look up and say, wow, that was kind of funny. Oh, that was cute. Oh, those breasts are nice. Oh, this was great. I thought it was such an obvious attempt to have people not walk out of the theater and shit on the movie by reminding them what they had just seen. And then it came to me, this was my exact complaint about Spies Like Us. They did the exact same thing. And it was definitely a defensive measure for the studio to be like, we can't let them walk out of here without at least reminding them that they might have laughed once or twice.
Big D, you nailed it. This ending is totally fake it till you make it. Like in the original Fletch, actually, the writer, Andrew Bergman, they asked him about it, and he was like, yeah, Fletch he's very hot at the time. And the great thing is that Universal always thought Fletch was a hit movie, and they treated it like a hit. And even when the first previews weren't that good, they never got frightened. They just said, this is a hit. They were selling it like a hit, and then it was a hit. This is Hollywood in the late 80s and early 90s. They were just like, we will confidence our way into a great movie. And listen, in 2020, we are not fooled, my friends.
No.
Well, now is the time for our Shat score. Our Shat score on the Shat meter is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie would take to get off your bum. A 5-wipe movie is stepping into the toxic sludge at Belle Isle. A 0-wipe movie is Arleigh Ermey's teeth just glinting on the set of Farnsworth Ministries. And I'll start it off this time. For me, this was the comedy version of another movie I gave 4.5 wipes, Willow, which, much like this movie, is a movie that had everything going for it and delivered next to nothing. Now, Fletch is a sequel, so they had the advantage of knowing what worked last time. Like you said, Big D, set it in LA, make the guy super clever, make the people that he's punching up against the elite instead of punching down. Instead, they gave us this. They had star power in Phil Hartman. They had Tex Cobb. They had Arleigh Ermey. They had Chevy Chase. And they had the budget, as you mentioned, Big D, for zippity-doo-dah, musical numbers, Hollywood promotion, big sets. And instead, what we ended up with was this movie that had only a few saving graces. There was the mystery of who killed Amanda, which I did generally care about, and who wanted the land. And yes, they held that out. I didn't know for sure until the end of the movie. Credit for that. That gets you half a wipe off. And as you mentioned, Adam, the synth score, it held a place in my heart. For me, 4.5 wipes.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Gene. I also gave it 4.5 wipes. I really didn't enjoy this movie. I thought that Chevy Chase was phoning in his performance the whole time. I thought the script was awful. I thought it obviously has not aged well and that it was really outdated in a lot of ways. I did smile a few times. I did laugh at one or two of the jokes that actually worked, but overall, I just thought it was pretty awful. I was messaging you guys all throughout it like I'm only 20 minutes in and now it's only 37 minutes in. So I was watching my clock the entire time wondering when it was going to be over. And I'm really glad it finally is and that we reviewed it and we can kind of put Fletch away. I would never watch this again, but I'm not going to give it a full 5 wipes. I've never given 5 wipes before. And I feel like that's a special kind of movie. And this movie isn't even special enough to get that first 5 wipes from me. So I'm giving it a solid 4.5 wipes.
Wow, that's harsh. So for me, I think it's a 4.5 wipe movie. The 5 wipers are movies that are just a complete shit show. What makes this movie so bad is that Chevy Chase doesn't even fake an attempt to care about the movie he's making. He doesn't give a shit that we spent money and we're sitting in the theater. He doesn't give a shit about anything else other than his smug ass. So that offends me. So I don't care about the social justice warrior, the plantation dance fucking sequence montage sing along. I don't mind that. I don't mind him calling people boy. It was 89. I can deal with that. But I can't deal with a lack of effort. We are worth more than that as an audience. And it really bothered me the fact that he just did not give a shit. So you know what? Fuck it. I'm giving it a 5 wipe. Fuck Chevy Chase.
Ooh.
I'm giving it a 5. Oh, no, I can't. Because you know what? The artwork was great. You said some of the supported characters, like Hal Holbrook, is great. I don't want to penalize them for Chevy. Chevy is a 5. The rest of the cast is maybe a 3.5, a 4. So I'm going to average it out to 4.5. But I will never be watching this again. But I will tell you to Ash and Gene, give the first Fletch a chance. It was early enough in Chevy's career that he did not start drinking his own Kool-Aid. So there is some of that Ryan Reynolds, that cockiness, that Van Wilder in him that makes it somewhat enjoyable, at least I remember. But this movie is not that, and this is a 4.5.
For those of you listening, I hope you felt that moment. Time stopped for a second when Big D said 5 wipes. I think my heart skipped a beat. We were all just frozen and suspended in a moment. And I'm glad he came to his senses. So with Big D at 4.5 wipes, Ash at 4.5 wipes, and Gene Lyons at 4.5 wipes, that makes it 4.5 wipes for Fletch Lives.
This puts Fletch Lives in some elite category at the bottom of the Shat portalet. It is now tied with a 4.5 wipe score in the 161 space with Highlander, 10 Things I Hate About You, and Predator 2. So I think it is in some rare quality films. It's up there with some of those films that are just classically bad, but in much of a less enjoyable way.
And I know a lot of people are going to say this was a travesty regarding 10 Things I Hate About You. If you haven't heard that pod, go back and listen to it. We had our reasons. We had very, very good reasons. Well, that's it for Fletch Lives. Now is the time for our shout-outs. Our shout-outs are our way of saying thank you for visiting shatthemovies.com. And we have a ton of them, mostly aimed at me. So I'll try to zip through them very quickly. Ash, this one actually might be toward Finn. It says, shite, shat, poo, crap, bumhole. So I hope that Finn appreciates that. The next one is from It a Poo Poo, Mr. Folk. Gene, can I have some of your DNA so I can clone you and train the clone not to be such a bitch? We can call that clone the better Gene.
That's my favorite.
Mike Coxhuge. Jake, naked in his sleeping bag. Graham. Thank you, Jake. See me. Benjamin. Always keeping on. The day is always better with Shat in my ear. Cheers, guys. Kev B. Well, thank you, Kev.
Yes.
That's the way to do it. Joseph Matosian. Winston's PP. If Shat the Movies had to rename itself after a movie, it would be called Clueless because none of you know what the fuck you're talking about. Gene, nobody's impressed by your social justice tendencies. I think it may just be autism. Thanks. Have a good day.
Wow.
The social justice warrior in me says, fuck you.
Oh, yes.
This is a great one. TJ, who was upset not to hear a shout out after Sling Blade because a bunch of man-childs and women, hi Ashley, make up stupid names to fuck with Gene or Raj or whoever the fuck reads them, and who just simply left his name, a very short, simple name, who just wanted the shout out he was promised, who'll be waiting with bated breath. Good day, sirs. And Ashley, I dig her. Fuck any internet troll weirdo degenerate who had or has an issue with her.
Yeah.
Wow.
Jill, Shane the Mac Daddy McCartney. I feel like Jill didn't really get her money's worth on that one. So glad you got Ash on the podcast. The show hasn't been the same since Carrie died. R.I.P. Carrie. I hope she's not really dead. And that comes from Is Ashley a Goth Though at gmail.com.
Oh my
Scott,
God.
Mickey D, Trinity Atkins is coming October 17th, 2020. Drew Peacock, Mallory M from Seattle. And sadly, and finally, now let's get the original power trio back. Thank you, everybody who sent in your shout outs. Again, if you'd like to hear your name on the podcast, even though I've tried repeatedly to remove it from the website, you can find the shout out box lurking at shatthemovies.com. Go there now. Big D, what's the next movie?
So next week we will be doing a movie which tells the tale of a mummy that is aroused. Oh, sorry. Is about
Sold.
That's
it. Just right there. It's a winner.
It's sold. Let's watch it. Let's review it.
So,
I mean, he kind of is.
Next week's movie is a rousing, suspenseful, and horrific epic about an expedition to treasure-seeking explorers in the Sahara Desert in 1925. Stumbling upon an ancient tomb, the hunters unwittingly set loose a 3,000-year-old legacy of terror, which is embodied in the vengeful reincarnation of the Egyptian priest who had been sentenced to an eternity as one of the living dead. It was commissioned by Ryan G. It was released in 1999, and it was directed by Stephen Sommers. And it went on. It was pretty good at the box office, grossing over $416 million worldwide against a production budget of only $80. So this was a big hit back in 99.
And stay tuned to the end of this podcast to hear the trailer for that movie and try to guess what that aroused mummy is. I want to send a big thank you to Adam and Josh for your 6th of 7 commissions, I believe.
Well, hold on. I don't want to give Josh any credit. Josh didn't pay anything here. He's just, the bad twin is tied to Adam. This was all Adam. So we don't want to have a twin fight.
All right. Well, thank you, Adam. And this concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, hosts@shatthemovies.com. You can support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, completing a free anonymous survey to help attract advertisers, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all that information by visiting our website, shatthemovies.com. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. If you haven't gotten enough King B or Ashley Schlafly, they're both on Shat on TV with me right now doing Lovecraft Country. Check it out. It's coming out on HBO. It is out actually right now as we speak. So check it out. You can find all that information on our website, shatontv.com, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, Ashley Schlafly, and the King Bee, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
Come on, Ash. What are you doing? You're sleeping.
Sorry, I was. You want me to do it?
Do it now.
Tell them.
Stay the fuck at home.
Where did you get this?
On a dig down in Thebes.
Jonathan, I think you found something.
There is an ancient legend of a place known as the City of the Dead.
They call it the doorway to hell.
Where the earliest pharaohs were said to have hidden the wealth of Egypt.
Are we going into battle?
There's something out there. Something underneath that sand.
They came to uncover its secrets.
Mummies, my good son. This is where they made the mummies.
They sought to unlock its treasure.
And then there was light.
Oh, boy.
What they did.
Oh, my God. It does exist.
I think this may be the Book of the Dead.
Was unleash a force unlike any the world has ever known.
You must not read from the book! What the hell is that?
You have unleashed the creature that we have feared for more than 3,000 years.
Whoa!
He will regenerate and no longer be the undead.
We are in serious trouble.
On May 7th.
Can you swim?
If the occasion calls for it.
Trust me, it calls for it.
Universal Pictures invites you.
His powers are growing.
Run! This just keeps getting better and better.
To experience the adventure.
It appears he's already chosen his human sacrifice.
That will live forever.
If he turns me into a mummy, you're the first one I'm coming after.